All right, we're back for week 6, final week of streamside fly tying. And we're doing what we're calling the Krunchy Krayfish. And it's a little pattern I've been kind of playing with for the last 2 or so years. This is the most recent version, I guess. Changed the weighting system a little bit. But yeah, designed for smallmouth carp in the Great Lakes or pretty much anywhere, and heavily influenced by a buddy of mine, Cole Lutke. So shout out to him for throwing some ideas out. But we'll get started here. First thing I'm going to do, I got number 4 streamer stripper from Fulling Mill in the vise. You can time bigger if you want. You can use a different hook. The original one I did was on a 4, but it was a 3x long, so it was actually a bigger pattern. I like this smaller one for the flats where I fish. I want it light. I don't want a super big heavy fly. This is about the average size of the little crayfish I see. So we'll get started, and all I'm going to do, I'm going to start my thread right at the eye. I'm not going to worry about putting our weighting system on at this point, and I'm just going to move my thread all the way to the bend and then down the bend a little bit, because again, this being a crayfish pattern is actually going to ride hook point up, and by going down the bend a little bit, that's going to aid in kind of getting those claws in a more upright position. More like it's a crayfish trying to defend itself or get away from something. But first thing I'm going to do is, once I get my thread to as far down that bend as I want, right about there, I'm going to move back up to the straight portion of the shank, and I'm going to take our first material, which is a rubber leg, which is going to be the antennas. And this is I think it's pumpkin and orange. It's got an orange tip to it. I'm just going to wrap that around my thread. You can see I've got rubber legs on both sides. This is the easiest way I've found to tie these in. Just going to match the tips and essentially start wrapping my thread again, and that's going to move this material right to the top of the hook shank. I'm going to stretch it and pull it to my side, and then my thread tension is going to move it right to the top of the hook. And then once they splay out a little bit, we are going to trim those once we're done with the fly, so don't worry too much about how long they are, if they're the right length. And then I like to put a little hotspot in here. This one we're doing today is kind of a rusty crayfish, which we have a lot of them here in the Grand Traverse Bay area, and I guess they're all over the state. And you can do these patterns in all sorts of different colors. I like a hot orange hot spot on this one in particular. I do this pattern in a blue. If you do any kind of research on crayfish, you'll notice that some of them, when they molt, actually turn blue. And I will do a purple hot spot, like a hot purple, and I'll do purple legs and antennas for the blue ones. But all I'm going to do is I'm going to make a little spot here, basically a ball of dubbing, and I want a little bit bigger than that. So disregard if you were doing the in-person tying and we were talking about dubbing, where we want thin little wispy amounts of dubbing. Not the case with this one. We want a nice big ball. And now I'm going to pull some of that back, put my thread right at the beginning of that ball. That ball is going to help prop out our claws. And at this point, if you have a rotary vise, I like to flip it to the correct orientation for fishing this fly. If you don't have a rotary vise, you can do all of this like that, or you can take your hook out and put it in upside down if you want to. It's totally up to you. On this pattern, I like using I believe it's kind of the shoulder neck area of a pheasant. You can see these guys right here kind of have that claw look to them. It's really easy. You get a ton of them on these capes. So yet another great use for a pheasant skin. I've seen and done these with, you know, squirrel zonkers, rabbit zonkers. These hold their position really well. So all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pluck 2 of these feathers out, and I've prepared this one. I just basically take all the fluff off. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pinch the tip of this. I'm going to pull most of these fibers down, but I'm not going to pull them off of the shaft of the feather. So that's about the right size for a claw on this. And you can change them. You can make them bigger, you can make them smaller. But that's about what I want. And I'm going to leave those fibers sticking off to the side, and you'll see why here in a second. Make sure I don't lose my other feather. So I'm going to grab this feather with a loose wrap right at where I split that. And now if I'm careful, I can lightly pull. I'm gonna get one more wrap on here just to be safe. Lightly pull the tip of this feather so that I get, you know, an extra little piece of that arm. It just gives a little bit more of a lifelike crayfish arm. And again, you'll see that ball, when you tie up to it, really helps splay that claw or arm out. I'm going to take my other one, and I'm going to get roughly the same size claw. You can match them up. That looks pretty good. And again, the beauty of a rotary vise is I can rotate this and capture this one so I can see it. Again, 1, 2 wraps loose. I'm using a waxed thread, so it kind of grips onto it pretty well. And when I get the length I want, wrap over that, and again, wrap back against that ball. Now this one moved down on me. That's okay. These are really durable. I can manhandle these and push them around. Now that I've got them where I want, I can tie down all these little wispy bits, cut the stems off. The stems on these are pretty hollow, so they tend to stay where you put them. And I'm just going to leave all that on here. We're going to cover it with dubbing, so I'm not super concerned about it being super neat and tidy. Just get that bound down. Now, before I do my body, I am going to put on the weight system on this. So initially I did a belly weight with some beads down here. I do like that for heavier ones, but for real shallow, spooky fish, especially carp, I've really liked these Shrimp and Cray Tails. This is a size medium. They say it's for a 2 to 4. Being a size 4, this should work out fine. The key here is not blocking the eye of the hook. You know, if you tie it in too far forward, obviously you can't put any kind of tippet through there. So I'm going to make sure I don't crowd the eye. Get a couple turns over the top of it. Really lock it in. I don't like using glue on these. I've been told by people that carp can smell it. I don't really know if they can, but I'm not going to risk it because they're tricky enough out here to catch, so I don't want that going against me. But if you tie it in nice and tight, they don't move. But if you wanted, again in class, I think I showed everybody that the example I had monofilament eyes on them. That's when you would put these on, is right now after your claws. And again, that bump is going to kind of help splay those out. But we're doing a bare bones fishing version. I don't think the fish really mind if it has eyes or not. If I was going to sell these, I'd put eyes on them just because it looks cooler. But at this point, we're going to take Cohen's Carp Dub, Acapulco Red. This stuff is really nice. I like the little rubber leg bits in there, the different colors, gives it some depth. Because if you look at these crayfish, they're not just a solid color, they're kind of mottled. They have some different colors going on. And just like that Hotspot, I'm not super concerned about neat and tidy dubbing, but I do want to go all the way back to those claws. And I'm just gonna keep grabbing more and more dubbing when you need it. And we're gonna work our way up almost to the eye of the hook. We gotta leave a little room for, I guess, what I would call a wing, which is gonna represent kind of the shell back of these crayfish. And just keep adding dubbing. And again, you want it kind of spiky, kind of buggy, I guess. I like to pick these out. If you pick it out back here towards the head of the actual crayfish, you do get almost like some legs. You could, if you wanted to really dress this thing up, you know, do the eyes, you could run 3 sets of rubber legs right here for actual legs. I've done it. I don't really know if it makes that big of a difference. But I'm going to leave about an eye's length, a hook eye's length of bare hook so that I can tie in this wing. Now, the wing material we're going to use is Strung Fuzzy Fiber. This is one of my favorite materials available now, whether it's for big stuff, small stuff. I've used it on emerger flies, spinners, crayfish, big pike and musky flies. But I'm going to take a small chunk, and again, tying these flies is going to give you the idea of how much of this you need. It's hard to articulate how much you need because we are going to double it over. But I would, I'm going to take about that much off the hank, and I'm going to cut it at 2 inches for this fly, about 2 inches. Actually, now that I look at it, if I put it at the midpoint, it's a little bit long, just under 2 inches. I'm going to cut some off of that. And let's see, let's measure it. Let's see what's it at. 1 3/4 inches as the phone rings. But I'm going to take that square edge, and just like everything else that's square cut that we don't want, I'm going to start pulling on some of these. I'm going to create a little bit of a taper. And this is going to look much nicer in the water. It's going to look a little more lifelike, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to split the hook, and I'm going to tie this in at the 50% mark, 50-50 right on top. Take a nice loose wrap, build a little valley, and then I'm going to take my thumb and I'm going to spread this around. I don't want it to go all the way down the sides, just a little bit. And now that I got that, you can kind of see it spreads out, but doesn't go all the way down the sides. Take this part going forward, push it back, Get it under the hook point there. Then I'm going to come back over and tie that down. A couple wraps. And again, I want to spread this out. And all that's going to do is when this gets wet, if I can get my hook out of the way, it pushes down and gives you more of that shellback look. I'm using kind of a reddish orangey thread, so it blends in really nice. If you use black, it'll look just fine. If you use white, you can hit it with a marker, make it whatever color you want. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump down and I'm only going to put my thread on the eye of the hook, which is kind of tricky. I like to whip finish on the actual shank of the hook. A little more durable. Missed it. There we go. Less likely to get nicked by a tooth. But again, if you want to super glue these, you're more than welcome to. Again, I don't know if it really makes a difference. But that is the Krunchy Kray. There it is from the top. Again, it's kind of a very suggestive but also pretty lifelike little crayfish. Now these antennae are really long, so I'm going to come in and cut those guys to a little bit more appropriate length, probably 2 times the hook shank. And there we go. Pretty easy, as long as you can tie a bunch of materials in right at the same spot back here. You'll get the hang of it. All right, thanks again for coming to Streamside Fly Tie-In, January, February. And yeah, have a good one.